Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a video on airplane food and wine. And why I'm doing this is recently I follow a lot of YouTube channels and I love the content of a lot of YouTubers, particularly like travel guys and food guys. But I find that some of them, they actually talk about, to kind of expand their horizons. Like a lot of food people talk about wine, and also a lot of travel people when they go on board planes, they talk about the food and wine. And I thought I'd kind of give you my 2 cents of this. I have obviously other channels, YouTube channels that deal with wine, and in particular that's the site that has my most viewership and probably I feel the most comfortable in terms of my knowledge. It's called Trophy Wine Hunter, so I wanted to kind of share that with people that do the food, and I also have a travel channel. But let's talk about food and wine on airplanes. The first point I want to make is I'm not trying to disrespect any of the airlines. They try to do the best job they can, but there are certain conditions that make it almost impossible to have the food of the same quality as you would have on land. And so when you see these YouTube videos about this tremendous food on airplanes, take it with a bit of grain of salt. It's probably a little bit about content, and I'll explain kind of why. And of course they're trying to do their best, and of course it's great, but in almost every circumstance, and I'm even including most business class and first class meals, you would probably rather have a meal at your regular restaurant, at your regular neighborhood restaurant. It'd be probably equivalent or much better. And I'm, again, not disrespecting the airlines, but just kind of being honest. So why is this? It's because you have to figure out when you're on an airline or in the air, there's a number of factors that affect your taste buds and your olfactory senses. First, cabin air pressure. So cabin air pressure is much lower when you get up in the air, and that makes your taste buds less sensitive to sweet and salty flavors. And for that reason, most airline food is actually geared up in terms of the salt content and also the sweetness. So people find it bland, they kind of add more salt and pepper. Well, you're basically adding a tremendous, almost like double what you would normally have in terms of salt content, just to make it more palatable. Second thing is that there is dry air in the cabin, and the humidity is low in the cabin because they have low cabin pressure, and it's very dry. To a point, the humidity is somewhere probably less than 20%, and that's equivalent to like being in the desert. Okay, so that affects your taste buds and also your olfactory, your nose. So your nose, the mucus in your nose dries up and you can't smell. And 80%, up to about 80% of what you taste is actually smell. So that's one factor. Secondly, your taste buds dry out. And so in a way, you can't really taste. What you're tasting is fairly manufactured to be pleasing. So if you had the same meal on on the ground, you probably find it very sweet and very salty. And so again, they're trying to do their best. The last thing is noise has a huge effect on sweetness and makes things much more sweet. And just to let you know, we don't really realize how noisy it is in an airplane, but essentially the background noise in an airplane is somewhere between 80 to 85 decibels. So when you go to a concert, a rock concert, and it's above 100 decibels, you usually try to, lots of people recommend you should probably put in earplugs. So for a long haul flight, you're having basically you're in a very noisy restaurant for like 14 hours. So we don't feel it, and that has a huge effect on also taste. Interestingly, the sour, the bitter, and the spicy components are not affected. And the other thing that's not affected is for some reason, what is enhanced by all these factors is umami. And I don't actually know what umami is, but it's in things like sardines, seaweed, mushrooms, tomatoes, and soy sauce. So that's one thing that you might want to try actually when you're on board, is to taste umami. And umami is very much enhanced by loud noises, and also is contained in tomato. So that's why it's kind of an interesting thing. People sometimes will drink tomato juice or Bloody Marys on board because it actually tastes better. Like, I personally find tomato juice a little bit tart and acidic on the ground, but try it in the air. It actually, because of the actual factors that enhance umami, tomato juice actually becomes fruity and bright and quite pleasant instead of much more like too earthy and too acidic. The other factor that you have to take into account is everything on board is heated. So they don't make the food on board, they just reheat it. And I'm sure some of the flight attendants are very good at what they do and how to not overcook it and heat it. But essentially all the food is cooked first and just reheated. As compared to anything else on the ground, any other neighborhood restaurant, that's why I say this, any other neighborhood restaurant would, when you order something, kind of make it right away and then bring it to your table, so it's fresh. Anything that's cooked, minimum probably has been cooked for about 2 hours and just is being reheated. So it's really difficult to make spectacular food. Some of the cold dishes that are served, like of course caviar won't be affected. Of course, things like cold lobster that's plated, that won't be affected. And people will say, well, some really high-end airlines have chefs on board. The chef doesn't cook. The chef, all they do is they replate things, and they can also cook what is already cooked food. So they can replate things, they can mix things that are, so that maybe enhances it, but they don't actually have a stove on in the air to recook. So everything essentially that is hot is already cooked. So that's why I'm saying that if you have the choice, you probably want to any neighborhood restaurant that you would have would probably have the same quality as even a business or first class meal on board. So knowing all these things, kind of what are the strategies when we eat food aboard? One, I always think, try the tomato juice and see what you think. But two, if you have the ability, and if you're especially flying in first or business class, you usually get access to the lounge, eat in the lounge first. And I'm not saying don't eat on board, eat whatever you like, but you're gonna have a better meal in the lounge, especially if you're in first class or high-end business class like Emirates, where they have a really nice lounge where they have a la carte meals that are available. Even Air Canada with their signature lounge, you're gonna have a better meal there than on board. And I'm not, again, disrespecting the airlines or their crew. It's just not factually true that you can have a better meal on board with all the factors that I've said, and also the idea that the meal, whatever you order in the lounge, is going to be cooked. It's going to be fresh. It's going to be, heated, but it has been cooked and then just brought out on a heating plate, and then you have it. It's not going to be there for hours. The minimum amount of time that you're going to have is going to be before a meal is served, even if you're in first class, is probably at least an hour after takeoff. So it's going to be heated for that long at least. The other thing that, especially with long haul, is we want to meet a meal early on in the flight, because the longer the flight, the drier your nose and your taste buds are going to be, and the less sensitive. Now, I'm not saying that this is, again, disrespecting food. Enjoy the food. If you love food on board, that's great. It's a great experience. That's excellent. Having said that, do take it with a grain of salt when you see YouTubers glowing about food on board. Again, most of the times you can probably get equivalent or better food when you are at a regular restaurant on land. And that's not to take away the experience. It's a great experience it's kind of a time killer when you're on board a flight for 12 hours. It does make it more pleasant when you have nice food and things like that. But to compare that experience to, let's say, a Michelin star restaurant is, in my opinion, totally ridiculous. And this shows a lack of understanding of food. And, that's probably why these, people are kind of travel YouTubers, not food YouTubers. Now let's go to wine, because wine is something that I'm very familiar with. And again, a lot of the people, even if they're travel YouTubers, even if they're foodies, they're generally not wine people. So let's make a couple of comments about wines first. Same thing that happens. The sound, the dryness, the air pressure, all affects your taste buds, which also affects and your nose, which affects your perception of wines. So wines that are on the ground that are fruity will actually taste thin, tannic, and acidic. And part of it is that mid palate is gone because your dryness of your taste buds. So wines that are very well balanced, that are really nice wines on land, will actually taste either acidic or tannic on board. And so it will almost taste a little bitter and a little shallow, which is kind of funny. So what airlines do is they purposely choose fruity wines that are low in acid and low in tannins. And I didn't understand this when I was kind of first going to business class, because I was saying, well, why are they choosing all these weird wines? Why don't they choose, all these great Bordeaux's and, American wines? And they always choose these kind of weird light wines and low tannins. Like, why would they do that? In fact, probably they've had experts that said, hey, these are the wines that are going to taste better on board. Most wanted, or the most sought after alcoholic beverage on board is champagne. And what is champagne? Champagne is a sparkling that's very acidic. So with the factors on an airplane, you will actually get even more acidic and more tart. And so that's kind of a problem. Likewise, the second most sought after wines for high-end travel is Bordeaux wines. What are Bordeaux wines? They're blends of mostly Cabernet wines, and they're very tannic. And so again, that wine will continue to be even more tannic when it's on board. And so that's why you don't see some of the best Bordeaux's out there, because they will taste not very good on board. Again, the same thing applies with food to wine. You probably want to drink the wines early on in the flight when your taste buds and your nose is not dried out. Generally speaking, on land, if you have a low acid wine, personally, I don't like those type of wines because they don't have that vibrancy. They don't have, they're not mouth watering, and therefore they will be kind of, in my mind, flat or flabby. Those of you who know nothing about wine, I'm going to give a short precursor about wines and what you'll find on board. Firstly, if you're talking about the wines, I'm not talking about spirits, beer, or anything like that, but just wines on board on almost every economy flight. If you like wine, go and have it. If you don't, you're not missing out very much. Most of the wines are going to be very value oriented, like means under $20 Canadian, and so you're not missing out very much. You're not learning very much about wines, drinking them, okay? When we're talking about business and first class, you're going to find a number of selections. And again, for people that are not really involved in wine, go and try these out. For what we would call very focused people, or people who are really interested in wines, most of those wines are not going to be mind-blowing. They're probably in the $20 to $50 range. But for people that don't drink a lot, that's actually a nice range to try different things. So you're usually going to get a selection. When you get on board, you're going to get a selection of a sparkling wine. For the higher end kind of airlines, you're going to get actual champagne, which is more expensive. For other places, you can get sparkling wine. What's the difference between sparkling wine and champagne? Very simple. Champagne can only be produced in the Champagne region in France. Sparkling wine is sometimes produced in different methods, but could be produced in the same method as champagne, but may use different grape varietals. And if you want to know more about champagne, you can also look at my other channel, Trophy Wine Experiences, to know more about champagne or more in-depth knowledge. But essentially, you're going to get a sparkling wine on board. If you get a champagne, you should ask them, is it champagne from the Champagne region? If it is, it's usually quite worth it, because that's going to be a $50 or $60 bottle. That's quite a nice, sometimes even more. If it's what they call vintage, if it has a year on it, then it's probably about $100 a bottle. And so that's something that people don't normally try, and it's great to have. Most people like champagne. It's very classy. But again, based on what I've told you, drink that early on before your taste buds and your nose dries out, because it's going to get tartar and tartar and more acidic. If you have a choice between a rosé and a regular white champagne, then I would choose the rosé. The rosé is a little bit more expensive. It's harder to make. And the difference is really the grape varietals that are being used in it is a little bit different, and the rosé has a little bit of skin contact. And you'll get some white wines and some red wines. Again, the very simplistically wines, they are divided into what they call New World and Old World wines. New World wines are what we would think of like in North America, Australia, and they are distinguished by, you will actually have the grape varietal on the label. Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir. These are all grape varietals. When you have a grape varietal on the label, that means it's from the New World. The surprising thing is, if it's an Old World wine and it has it, that usually distinguishes that it's probably a very low-end Old World wine. What do we mean by Old World wines? Mostly European wines, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal. It says New Zealand would be New World. And so with Old World, they don't put the grape varietal on the label. They put the region. And they expect that if you are a wine person, you will know that that region is a certain grape type. So Bordeaux is not a grape type. Bordeaux is a region. And if you know something about wines, you'd say Bordeaux red wines are produced from Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot grapes. White wines are produced from Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc grapes. Italy, the Tuscany region or the Chianti region, that's a region. That's not a grape type. The grape type that's used there is Sangiovese. For a Barolo, a lot of people love Barolo. Barolo is a region. It's not a grape type. The grape type they use in Barolo is Nebbiolo. So again, there's a different understanding that they expect you to do. And that's something, as a person, when you go on board on business class, you can learn these things, because you might not want to go out and buy a wine for $50 that you don't know about. So you can try it on board. And so and a lot of the, particularly the higher end airlines like Emirates, they actually have a lot of wine training, so you can ask them. There's usually a card on board that tells you a little bit about the wines, but you can always ask them, hey, is this an Old World, New World, and what type of grape type is involved here? Or is Merlot a grape type, or is it a region? That's just banter, that's just talk, and no one's going to look down on you. A lot of people don't know that, and that's one good thing about drinking on board. You would probably drink lower acid, lower tannin wines, but you won't know that until you start drinking wine. So I won't kind of complicate things. A lot of people that get into wines actually know the characteristic, because there are characteristics of each grape varietal. So I would just start with, trying something on board, any grape varietal. You say, oh, listen, I would like to try a Riesling, and try that. And if you like a Riesling, next time you go on your next plane ride, you go and try another Riesling, and maybe that's the type of grape varietal that you like. Then you kind of would, the next time would say, well, what type of now you've tasted some New World Rieslings because it's on the bottle. You say, well, what type of Old World? Do you have any wines in the from the Old World that are Rieslings? And we know that Rieslings come from Germany and also from the Alsace region in France. But that's just a kind of understanding that to kind of grow your appreciation of wines, and just instead of just going on board, oh, I like this wine, but you don't learn anything. And I think one of the things with business class and first class is they provide you a variety of maybe foods and wines that you would not normally yourself go and try. So it's a really great learning experience for those people who actually don't know a lot about wines and would like to know a little bit more wines. I hope this video has been useful, and again, if you want to learn more about wines, I have another channel that goes pretty much in depth with wine called Trophy Wine Hunter, and I do have basic series for a basic beginner wine knowledge series in my playlist on that channel. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Until next time, happy eating.